download our Revise It Right revision app for hundreds of videos, quizzes, exam questions, tutor support and so much more. This video is about the rate of photosynthesis. Now, a limiting factor is a factor that is stopping photosynthesis from happening any faster. Okay, so really factors have a combined effect on the rate of photosynthesis, but which factor is limiting at a certain point depends on the environmental condition. And what I mean by that is, for example, at night time, then light would be a limiting factor. Or during the winter, temperature may be a limiting factor. So the limiting factor changes depending on the environmental conditions. Okay, other limiting factors other than light and temperature might be carbon dioxide levels and also potentially amount of chlorophyll in a plant. Now, plants can get certain diseases that reduce the amount of chlorophyll, for example, a lack of nutrients, or chlorophyll can become damaged, which could reduce the amount of chlorophyll. So we're going to go into each of these in a bit more detail now. So the first one we'll do is light. Now I'll draw a graph to explain as I go here. So if we put light intensity down the bottom along the x-axis, and then rate of photosynthesis along the y. So as we initially increase light intensity, what happens is we initially increase the rate of reaction. Okay, so initially, as we increase our light intensity, we increase the rate of photosynthesis. Okay. So as we initially increase the light intensity, we are initially increasing the rate of photosynthesis. Now that is because light provides the energy for photosynthesis to happen. Okay, so more light equals more energy, and therefore more photosynthesis can take place. Okay, however, what will happen is this will start to level off. And why that is because there may then be another factor that is now limiting the rate of reaction. Okay, so here, light is no longer limiting the rate of reaction. So even if we increase light and keep increasing light, it's not going to increase the rate of reaction anymore. Okay, so another factor might be limiting. So for example, carbon dioxide or temperature might be now limiting the reaction. Okay, if we think about it like this, if we had a graph and we had the amount of cakes we can make versus the amount of eggs we had, okay, as we keep increasing the eggs, we can make more cakes. However, we might get to a certain point where we run out of flour, for example. And if we've got no more flour, we can no longer make any cakes. Doesn't matter how many eggs we have, if we keep buying eggs, if we've got no flour, we can't buy any more eggs. So the line will then start to level off. Okay, so what that tells you is at this point in the graph here, light was a limiting factor. However, at this point here, light is no longer a limiting factor and another factor is affecting. So it could be carbon dioxide or temperature, or in our cake example, it could be flour. Okay, so importantly, as we increase light intensity, we increase the rate of photosynthesis until another factor is limiting the rate of photosynthesis. So we'll look at carbon dioxide, and to look at this in detail, let's remember to download our Revise It Right revision app, watch over 700 videos, answer 4,000 plus quiz questions, over 1,000 flashcards, 1,000 exam questions, worksheets, forums, and get help from qualified teachers and so much more. The link is in the description. Just quickly remember the equation for photosynthesis. You'll remember it's carbon dioxide plus water makes glucose plus oxygen, and this obviously uses light. Now if you think about it, and this is very, very similar to the egg example, the more carbon dioxide we have, the more photosynthesis can take place. The more eggs we have, the more cake we can make. That's because carbon dioxide is a reactant of photosynthesis, therefore the more of it we have, the more photosynthesis can take place. So if we draw a graph to represent that, it will look the same. So as we initially increase the amount of carbon dioxide, so carbon dioxide along the x, and the same again, the rate of photosynthesis along the y. As we initially increase the amount of carbon dioxide, we're going to increase the rate of photosynthesis. As that then starts to level off, what that means is there's something else is now limiting the reaction. It doesn't matter how much carbon dioxide we put in, it's not going to affect it because carbon dioxide is no longer limiting the reaction. It could be carbon dioxide, it could be temperature, it could be amount of chlorophyll, for example. And that's here. So that is carbon dioxide. And finally, we've got temperature. And temperature is always quite similar. So let's talk you through temperature now with another graph. Okay, so again, just like the others, as we initially increase the temperature, increase the temp, we are increasing rate of photosynthesis. Okay, so as we are increasing the temperature, we are increasing the rate of photosynthesis. You can see that with this line here. That is because, as ever, more or higher temp is equal to more energy. Okay, and therefore the reactants that are moving around with more energy, they're more likely to collide. The carbon dioxide, water, more likely to collide, and therefore the higher the rate of photosynthesis. However, what happens is when that gets to a certain point, and we call that its optimum temperature, beyond that point, the enzymes that are involved in photosynthesis, start to denature. And you'll find more detail on this in our enzyme video, but denature, remember, means they change shape. So when it gets too hot, the enzymes start to change shape because the bonds start to break. So the rate of photosynthesis massively decreases until it falls to 0. Okay, as we can see there. So initially increase the temperature, initially increase the rate of photosynthesis. However, when you get too hot, the enzymes start to denature, so the rate of photosynthesis falls, and it falls to 0. So that's how temperature. So you may be asked in your exam to recognise the different graphs. So you'll have to remember the light one looks like that, and also the carbon dioxide one looks like this, but temperature looks slightly different. So please remember that for your exam. And the final limiting factor that could affect photosynthesis is the amount of chlorophyll. You'll remember that chlorophyll absorbs light energy for photosynthesis to take place. So the more chlorophyll, the more light energy can be absorbed. So if we draw a graph and we'll put amount of chlorophyll along the x, and again rate of photosynthesis along the y, as we initially increase the amount of chlorophyll, we are increasing the rate of photosynthesis. And as I just said, that is because more chlorophyll means that more light can be absorbed, which means more energy for photosynthesis to take place. Okay. However, just like with our other graphs, there's going to get to a point where this is no longer the limiting factor. So it's going to plateau, it's going to level off, and something else is now limiting. So it could be carbon dioxide, it could be temperature, it could be light intensity. Okay, so that graph looks the same as the light intensity and as the carbon dioxide levels. It's only temperature that has a slightly different graph. So now what I'd like you to do is have a go at answering these questions. So if you pause the video and we'll go through the answers afterwards. So pause the video now. Okay, so let's go through these questions. Number 1, list the reactants of photosynthesis. So we've got carbon dioxide and we've got water. They're the 2 reactants. Define the term enzyme. So this is a bit of a throwback to a previous video. So if you haven't watched it, please make sure you do. But an enzyme is a biological catalyst. Okay, and you should remember this is something that speeds up the rate of reaction. And importantly, to add on to that, if you haven't added this, then please do. They remain unchanged and unused within the reaction. Define the term denatured, where it changes shape. The active site changes shape and therefore the substrate no longer fits in. Number 4, what is the word equation for photosynthesis? Well, we've got carbon dioxide, I'll struggle to fit this one in, plus water, glucose, plus oxygen. So there we go, so carbon dioxide plus water makes glucose plus oxygen, and remember that uses light energy from the sun. State 3 limiting factors that affect photosynthesis. Well, we've just learned about 4, so 3 of these are temperature, carbon dioxide levels, light intensity, and also amount of chlorophyll. What effect does light intensity have on photosynthesis? Well, as you initially increase the light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis increases. This is until something else, or light intensity, is no longer a limiting factor and something else starts to limit the reaction. What effect does temperature have on photosynthesis? Well, if we initially increase the temperature, our rate of photosynthesis is increasing. This is until its optimum temperature, where after that the bonds with the enzymes start to denature, so the rate of photosynthesis massively falls to 0. And finally, explain the effect of temperature on photosynthesis. Well, I've kind of done that just then. As we initially increase the rate of, or the temperature, the enzyme and the substrate have more energy, so they're colliding a lot more frequently. However, that is until it gets to its optimum, where it then starts to fall. That is because the enzyme starts to denature, so the substrates no longer fit into the enzymes, so the rate of reaction falls to 0. So again, quite a lot to take in there. We've learnt about the different factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis and what we mean by a limiting factor. Remember, something that's stopping photosynthesis from happening any faster. So you can now work through the quiz and the exam questions on our website, and if you don't understand any of this, then please get into contact with one of our tutors and they will be happy to help.